Welcome to Cancer and Peace. My name is Sean Stewart, and we're back with my good friend and our host, Peter Scalzo. And we've been wading through your biggest wall moment for the last couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. I don't know if it's 2 or 3 episodes now, but this has been a great exploration from my viewpoint, and I hope that you found it to be interesting also, just to re-experience this wall, maybe hopefully with not as much trauma as what you felt the first time. And just want to just maybe ask, how is that process for you right now as we've been
hard?
Yeah,
Painful.
It's brought up
Yeah, I think
memories.
I think reliving and putting myself back in that place is very difficult to do, but not as charged, less of a charge. So yes, I mean, I can tell there's been lots of healing work done, and it's sort of one of those times I have spoken about many times, but I don't like speaking out about it. I like to speak out about it just in the sense that it may be of help to others to talk about the wall, but personally, I don't want to talk about it all that much at times. So
There must be something in this that counselors would know more than us. That
Yeah.
It's like when you take time to think about the most painful areas of your life that you have to re-experience negative feelings, I guess, and emotions, and none of us like to experience our negative feelings and emotions for at least very long.
But I'm looking forward to these next podcasts because this is sort of going through the wall, and I think there was so many great lessons and such great riches that came out of that for me. So this is actually a fun time for me.
A fun time. That's really interesting. I'm going to just reset back up, and maybe you can help me out with this.
Okay.
So if you've missed an episode or two, I would just encourage you maybe to go back and listen to the last two, because what we were trying to do is describe and let you describe at least your biggest wall moment in your cancer journey. And we've put that at 2015. And I think the primary reasons is that all your surgical solutions had gone away, and you've been communicated to by your Dr. Grasso that there was nothing left he could do at that moment, and that it was time to get your affairs in order. And you were at a point where you felt like you were given a death sentence. Is that
Yes.
any more color you want to put on that at this moment? Just to recap, so people know why we call this the wall. Is like it's such a big moment in your life.
Yes, I think because it was so unexpected and such a shock. I did nothing in preparation for that moment. I thought that this would be like the others where I would have major surgery and the cancer would be removed and it wouldn't be a big deal from a metastatic point. We wouldn't find that type of cancer. This was unexpected, unforeseen, and I think, like I said in another podcast, I felt like my feet were taken out from under me, and I had nothing to hold on to. So I didn't know how to navigate this thing.
And I'm going to just put a mental picture out there. Yeah. This type of wall is when you show up, and it would be as if you were standing at the Freedom Tower, in downtown Manhattan, or the World Trade Center now. I don't know if they've changed what they call the name of and you were to look straight up, and it would be as high up as you, and it's like, and then if you were to look to your left and your right, that building would be as far as you could see. And so the wall that you're facing is that type of wall. It's like you have no ability to scale it. There's no ability to go around it. As far as you can see, it's that tall and that wide. And so it's this type of wall that you found yourself at. And this is this happens in many people's lives, that they run into a wall like this, and there's only one thing to do. It's either to go through or bounce off and go somewhere else. Try to run from it or hide from it.
And I'll just add, my go-tos for my other surgical walls and finding out I had cancer were not remedies. The prospect of being of the medical community having a great solution, that was not a remedy anymore.
Right.
The prospect of the people who were praying for me and this healing that I thought was going to be mine, it was going to come out that way, that we're good, there wasn't that much cancer, that was not part of this, like it had been part of the other parts of the journey. And what I was faced with was just there's a 5% chance of survival, and in a dark ICU room with all the medical apparatuses and drainage tubes and everything coming out of me, knowing that this would not be a survivable situation. That was my mindset.
And beyond that, it was going to be very painful.
Yes.
This recovery, what you described is that you recognized too that to recover from this, what you've gone through was going to be incredibly painful. So you had the prospect of pain in front of you in a wall that you couldn't scale.
Yeah, in the past, this was the third time that they had done a 14-inch incision. I would be there a month, but they revised everything. My bladder, the ureters, which are made out of intestinal tissue, had to cut more intestinal tissue and do all that. And in the past, I would muscle through it because I was like, okay, I'm cancer-free right now, and this is great. I'm going to, it was major changes, removing prostate, all that kind of stuff, but I would muscle through it.
The wall was still scalable.
Yes, I had no incentive to muscle through this. I'm like, what is the point? I'm just going to pass.
So we call this also the dark night of the soul, and you put verbiage around it when your buddy of mine, Johnny D, called up or sent you a text and asked you how your answer was. It's dark and getting darker. Right. And that's why we call it the dark night of the soul, is that you, in your inner man, your inner person, you could not see a path. You had lost hope in many ways, I think is a way of thinking about it too. And the reason why we wanted to visit this place is that it's my belief, and it's not the reason, but it's my belief that all of us face walls in our life. There's not a single person that won't face their own death in some, or humanity or mortality in some manner.
I'm going to say too, I just want to interrupt for not only lost hope, but lost meaning and lost purpose. Because in the past, I felt like, okay, God was performing this healing miracle through surgery, and I had a great purpose coming out of it. Meaning and purpose and hope were gone.
Yeah, we've talked in past episodes the importance of purpose.
Yeah.
And you felt that God had shown you that, hey, he was going to use this cancer journey with great purpose. And at this point, at least in your wall, it looked like that purpose had been taken away.
Yeah, and I didn't really realize it. I didn't think. And I thought, well, what was the deal with this message that I received from God that I felt strongly about, that he had given me about, that he was going to use this for ministry? And I was like, well, this whole thing doesn't make sense.
And that, I think, expressed itself in anger, bitterness, disappointment, because you spoke about basically shaking your fist at God in some manner, going, I believed this, and you've let me down.
Yep.
So that's the wall moment that we've brought everybody up to in the prior episodes. And so the point of today's episode is to really describe a bit of journeying into the wall. You can't scale this wall. It's too big.
Right.
There's no medical solution.
Right.
You could rely on God to pick you up and put you on the other side in a miraculous sense. But you didn't have that from God, that he was going to give you that. So you're standing on this side of the wall looking at it, and you communicate it's dark and getting darker. And your good friend, Johnny D, prays, and the voice that he believes he hears from God is, go and put a blank journal on Peter's chest, which is what he comes and does, I believe, the next day. And so when you got that journal laid on your chest, how did you feel about that?
What are you doing here? Get out of my room. No, I was like, okay, thanks, Johnny, for coming down here, but you don't understand. There's no
You
hope
don't understand.
Here. Yeah. And I don't know why you brought me this journal, and I put it on my tray table, and just shoved the tray table away.
So at that moment, you still couldn't feel any hope, any purpose.
No.
And at that moment, you
And
may have...
I'll add this. I didn't want to live.
Yes, that was an important thing that you shared. That's
I
that
did not want to live. It
and
wasn't like I was going to hurt myself, but I didn't want to live.
and is that because you knew the amount of pain it was going to take, and without purpose, hope, meaning, going through that pain without any of those on the other side seemed pointless?
Yeah, because it's like this recovery process from these surgeries takes so much work, is so involved. And I thought, and then I thought, well, I'm just going to do an end of life process. So what is the point? Why don't I just do the end of life process now?
Can you take a couple of minutes before we dive into the journal and describe that pain, because you've gone through it? 1 to 10, where, I mean, in some level of detail, what did you know was coming?
Well, I had done end of life journeys before with people, but physically,
Yeah.
the pain, I couldn't do narcotic pain meds, and the incision is rather large. I could feel the staples and the drainage tubes and everything. I mean, Tylenol was about the only thing that I could handle at that point. But and I was always consistently nauseous, very nauseous, because they had used part of my intestines, and my intestines always shut down for these surgeries. So nothing could pass through, and so I would usually I had an NG tube and I had a gastric tube to try to, because nothing was flowing through me. So that stuff would just need to be removed. And then the constant interruptions from medical people and the machines and the vitals, just everything, all the bags being hung, just everything going on. I was being fed through a PICC line for that surgery. So they were hanging to EPN, which is nourishment, but everything felt nauseous and sick to me. And I looked at my body, this was my 14th surgery, but the third time I had been gutted out, and I just actually felt pity on it. Like, it can't do anymore. It's done. My body's done. It just looked frail too. And so physically I was like, I'm spent.
Yeah, you felt spent. A form of tiredness.
Devastated. I can't do this anymore was the thought that I had. And then emotionally, where I was at. I mean, I was bankrupt of no joy, no hope, no pleasure, nothing like that. It was all pain. Emotionally, it was all meaningless. It was all hopeless. It was just a very dark, depressive kind of place.
It's hard to even, like, when you start describing that. Yeah. I mean, I can feel, like, in the natural empathy one can have to feel that place. And I can understand why. It's like, I don't want to stay here. Just constant nausea, pain, and hopelessness. Sounds like a form of hell that you were in. And so, so you have this journal that's been dumped on you, in your mind at least, and I think it was a gift from God. So the story that you've shared is that it sat there for 8 days. So you were in this place for 8 days, and it was just sitting there. What was going through your mind? Did you look at it? Did you think about it? What was going on in that space for 8 days?
Emptiness is all I can recall. I can't think of any profound or anything that was going on except emptiness. I mean, I had family members that would come and kids that would stay with me. And so that was reassuring and comforting. But I thought, none of this matters if I'm not going to live.
So the one gift that you had was that you were not alone.
Yeah.
meaning that you knew that there was some support system out
Yes.
there, so you could account for one gift at least
Yep.
in some recess of your mind.
Yep.
I know we talked about this prior and you didn't have an answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway, just because I think it's a question that's worth thinking about. Is what was the trigger that got you to pick up that journal?
Yeah, I think I could speak on that. I think it's basically, well, first of all, I'm an individual that likes to express myself through writing.
Mm-hmm.
Some people like to speak or, records their thoughts through that, but I actually like to write. And so I remember being in this like drain where I'm just going further and further down and thinking, I might as well just write something. I might as well just write how I'm feeling and recall how it was those first few days. And so I found that when I started to actually express these feelings, that something happened inside of me. The fact that I was able to verbalize and put a picture to what was going on was very helpful for me. Even though I wasn't in a place of, I was still not in a good place, but I at least was expressing what was going on inside of me.
I was thinking about this as you're talking about it there, and also watching every time you speak about the inside, you have your two fists together, and you're literally just bouncing them together. And so, to me, you're expressing this deep tension, and there's something that I think you can feel even in entering that moment right now, that by putting your two fists together, there's like this level of tension in that moment that you can still feel when you go back to it, which describes the intensity of that moment. Not that I have anything great to share about it, but I'm interested because there might be something that's really important about, you said you had no purpose, and yet in that moment, your purpose became just to express your humanity. It's like the one thing that couldn't be taken away from you was your humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's as if what I heard you just say, and you can put your own words around this in a sense, was while you didn't have a solution for your dark night of the soul, you didn't even see this as a healing. You took hold of your humanity and said, I can express my humanity in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it gave you a form of meaning.
Yes.
A
Absolutely.
purpose even.
Yes. Yes.
It's really fascinating that was something that was inside of you, was because you said you had no purpose, but then as we got to this point, the one thing that you grasped hold of was that you've been given purpose and meaning. As you look back at that now, how does that resonate with you in sense of like I'll put a different something beside it, and it's and to see if it jogs anything with you, is that because what sticks out to me is that we are made in the image of God.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was thinking about Man's Search for Meaning. We both read this book, and he talks about once you've been stripped of a purpose or meaning, then you die shortly thereafter. Like what would happen in these concentration camps was people would show up and they would be worked literally to death until they had nothing left in them. But if in that process, maybe they still had some energy left in their body, some muscle or fat that was still workable, but the reason why they kept going forward was they lost their purpose and their meaning. And usually that was relational.
Mm-hmm.
The way he described it, he said for him, knowing that he had potential family that he could one day reconnect with gave him enough purpose and meaning to fight for them.
Yeah.
And so,
I think, see, any prospect of the future I had thrown out.
Yep.
So I didn't think there was a future. So I think it's more likely for me as I process this is that, there's times when, like, my girlfriend will talk to me or somebody else, and I'll say, do you want me just to listen? So I think there was value for me in just venting. These first journal entries, and even through the middle of it, are all about me venting and not being fixed, but just having this blank sheet that I could say, this is really, really terrible, and I'm just going to say it. And I'm going to say some things to God that I've never said. Like, where are you? What's going on here? How could you allow this to happen? I'm going to put it all out there on paper. I'm not going to hold anything back because this is what I'm feeling. So there was a lot of value in being able to vent. And I see...
This implies that you didn't feel that freedom before.
Yeah, I think for sure.
The wall brought you to a point that you were going to communicate things that you've never communicated before in your humanity.
Yes.
And the most interesting part about that to me is that it was part of what it means to be made in God's image, is to have the ability to express something deep inside of yourself.
One of the things I mentioned in my book, but also when I speak about it, is that I railed against God, I think. And yet I clearly feel like he was never disappointed with me, just embraced me and was like a father saying, yes, I get it. I understand. Yes, this is bad. And it's okay. You go ahead and you just communicate exactly what's going on in your heart. And I thought, how wonderful to have a relationship with someone where you could be completely honest and real and vulnerable, and they don't cast you away because of it.
What's even more interesting is it's curing a false belief you had.
Yes.
And the false belief, I think, and you can put your own around this, but it was, or at least one of them is, that you're able to hide your real feelings from God, and that would put you in right standing.
Yep.
And God exposed your deepest feelings and gave you permission to share them.
Yep. And it opened up a whole pathway into Scripture for me. Now when I read David and Job and Jeremiah and even Jesus, I'm like, wow, they're being completely real, vulnerable, and honest.
I think it opened up a whole pathway to God.
It did.
For you that wasn't open before.
Right. It did.
And so there's some real importance that's going on. Anything else? I'm going to ask you to read your first entries here in a second. Anything else you want to share that strikes out to you as you're taking your first steps of journeying into the wall?
It was something that I didn't have a desire to do, but I thought would be helpful. In fact,
seems counterintuitive.
Yes.
Yes. It's like,
yes,
I don't want to do anything.
Right.
But I'm going to do this because it's helpful. Seems almost like this.
But I was like
paradox almost.
Yeah. I was in think of it as like being in mud and just wallowing in this mud and thinking, well, I'm going to do something because I hate being in this mud. This is a bad place to be in.
Mm-hmm.
So I just picked up this journal thinking, well, I'll just write how I'm feeling down. I don't know what it's going to do.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about recovery, we talk about the difference between sanity and insanity. There's this saying that you hear all the time is like, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And there's some truth and there's some not truth about that. But you did something brand new. Like the wall brought you into a change. And that brand new was you're going to express what was really inside of you in ways that you'd never expressed before.
Right. Yeah,
All right.
I was on new ground. This was, I'm going to die. This situation is the worst I've ever been in. I'm just going to let it all, doesn't matter anymore.
I'm going to throw out a Blackaby principle that I say all the time, but it's Blackaby's. Henry Blackaby, he wrote Experiencing God was one of his big works that I like. He's written some other leadership books that are really good. But this Blackaby principle is to experience God. God always brings you to a crisis of belief that requires faith in action to experience God.
Mm.
And so
That's good.
my thoughts right now is you're at that crisis of belief and you don't actually know it, but to experience God, you're going to have to take a step forward. You're going to have faith in action. And so you changed what you were doing. He was, to experience God, he has one step past that is God always, to experience God, we have to make major adjustments in our life. You can't just sit where you're at. You have to make adjustments to your life to experience him. And so here you are, these two principles are coming into play and you're getting ready to do something here. So let's wade into the first journal entries. And this is journeying into the wall.
Yeah. November 2nd, 2015 was the surgery, Groundhog Day. And I noticed the date. I have copies of, it was just the journal was not a large journal. It was one of those smaller journals that Johnny D likes. So, but anyway, so about 8 days later, so I was recounting some of what had happened. It wasn't live time, I guess. So I said, but it's like, okay, this is how I felt. This is what I thought.
This is your first journal entry into this little journal.
Yeah. And so this was the first night, and it was post-surgery was one of the worst feelings of my life. Dark, empty, death, separation from my loved ones, pain, residue from anesthesia, and drugs. And I put the first night was hellish, horrible. God help me, God, where are you?
Can we just stop there? That's the end of the first journal entry.
Negative and depression. And I'll just put down, Grasso had said, Dr. Grasso had said cancer was worse than what we thought. More work was required. Not sure if we got it all. No clean margins. You would need a high-powered chemo. But at that point, we didn't know that my kidneys were so damaged I couldn't take chemo.
Is this your first journal entry?
Yeah.
That's the complete one.
Yeah.
What does that represent to you?
Devastation to me.
Yeah. You mentioned a lot about the Psalms, and that later on we're going to hear the Psalms. I love Scazero's. He talks about one of the things, if you read the Psalms, you'll see that 2/3 of it is lament. And so that must have great meaning, that David had the freedom to lament in the Psalms, and the writers of the Psalms, and there was a freedom to lament. And so what I hear is lament, that you are expressing the condition of your soul, your heart, your emotions in that first entry. Did that feel unhealthy at first?
I don't know if I'd say unhealthy. I guess it did break through the paradigms that I had of sort of like, even as a Christian, it was that put a bow on it kind of thing. And there was no bow to be put on it. And so it did feel foreign to me to just lay it all out like that.
Have you explored where the bow on it came from, or where it comes from?
Yeah, I think just through my growing up in an evangelical space, I think it's.
Let's talk about your family space, though.
And my family of origin, it's the, we're not going to be vulnerable, real, and honest. We're going to bury certain emotions and pretend like everything's fine.
So you gave me generalities. And do you have an example of where you can think of where a bow was put on difficulty?
With my family of origin? Well, certainly some of the struggles my sister had with mental health, mental illness. Yes, certainly that. And certainly my oldest sister and her husband going through what they went through with a rock slide and losing their baby and almost dying. there was some sadness, but there was always this, God's going to do this, God's going to do that.
Yeah, what's a specific thing you would hear said that would be putting a bow on it?
God's got this.
God's got this. That's a great one. Yes.
Yeah. Everything's going to be fine. God's going to use this.
So,
Which I get. I understand that. I think
do you? Why do you get it?
in the sense that God is on the throne, and I think he allows and has a plan, but I also think that he loves it when we're real, vulnerable, and honest. And if the situation is bad, we should come out and say, this situation is bad.
So how has this changed your belief today? Meaning that you, it seems like maybe I put a little more definition on this.
I think I have this tension between giving somebody hope, but then letting them feel their tough emotions and sitting in the dirt with them.
Yes, the sitting in the dirt is something.
I listened to that.
You listened to that,
Yeah,
yes. So this, we're both referring to a podcast we heard that was sitting in the dirt, and the idea was, if you feel a need to give an answer because of your own inner place. In other words, most of the time when we give advice to somebody or give a God's got this, it's because we don't have the ability to enter into their pain, to sit in that pain. And so somebody listening to this podcast, hearing this dark night of the soul moment of you, may want to say, hey, Peter, it's all going to be okay.
Right.
God's got this. God's on the throne. You know, you're going to spend eternity. If you do pass, you're going to spend eternity with him, and put all the bright side out there.
Right.
And many times this really represents that they don't have the ability to, that the fact that they have to give a bright side means they don't have the ability to sit and hear and experience the pain with you.
Yeah.
And it's so important to think about this. And you see this tension in the Psalms, this idea of many of the Psalms don't end with a happy entry. You know, this happy ending and an entry of all, hey, but God's got this. Many of them end in, and this is it. You know, this is the place I'm at. This is the lament.
Right.
And is that okay?
Yeah.
And what you're saying is that a big part of your formation was telling you, no, it wasn't okay to stay and just lament. It always had to have a bow put on the end of it.
And I
said always. I don't know if that's true, but
no, it's true. And always. And it was for me, not for them.
Yeah.
It was about me. Now, what I find bubbling up when someone is hurting is, I'm sorry. And just sitting with them, letting them express how they're feeling without judgment, critical, condemnation or anything.
Isn't it more healing?
Much.
Why?
That's what my son did with me.
Yeah.
He gave me permission.
He gave you permission.
Yeah. So validating.
Yeah, I felt convicted when I listened to the Sitting in the Dirt because I recognized that I still had a lot of that in me, of the need to put a bow on some conversations as opposed to just listen. And I don't think what we're prescribing here is don't ever give hope. I think that would also be wrong. It's understanding what's going on with that person. And there's, the book of Ecclesiastes says there's a time for everything, and recognizing that there are times to lament. And that's what you're describing right now is your time to lament. And when somebody's at their time of lament, putting a bow on it is saying it's not okay to lament.
Right.
There is a time for hope. And so we have to figure out how to balance that tension.
Yep.
And I think oversimplifying this process would be just to say, let people lament and never give hope.
Yeah.
Or always give hope at the end, because if they don't have hope, then they're not going to survive.
Yeah.
And it's understanding that neither one of those are the two extremes. There's a tension that you have to walk into. That's part of our humanity, is feeling that tension, I think, is what we're talking about here. And so I want to explore that as you keep walking through this journey. Is like, when is it helpful to be where the truth of that comes? Where does that come into? And I think it shows up from my understanding. I mean, I've read your entire journal because you've shared it with me and we've interacted on it, but I'm really going to be interested into wading into that tension a little bit as you go through.
Yeah.
But understanding that where we're at right now, we're over time, and we just did your first entry. And I think that's good, is like giving an example of what it means to wade into this. Is it fair to say that wading into the wall many times is going to start with a time of lament?
I think it has to be. I mean, personally, because I think grieving is an absolutely necessary part of the first process. These are losses and limits that are thrust upon you. Like cancer, this surgery and this new diagnosis of metastatic cancer was thrust upon me. I have to grieve that. My whole life, I knew my life was going to change completely, and I was going to pass. I have to go through the grieving process with that.
Yes. And so I think we're going to, because we're already at time for today, I think we're going to I want to highlight two things that your first entry and what we've led into get to. And that is that lament has been an important part of your journey through the wall. And you started with lament. You didn't start with any silver lining. It didn't start with, I had this great word of truth and whatever. It starts with lament. And it stayed lament on that first entry. And the other piece that I wanted to highlight was that it challenged something about your formation that wasn't true.
Right.
Both are incredibly important. And so if anything else comes out of this episode, is that when we go through the wall, it's generally going to challenge us. It's going to bring us to that crisis of belief, and we're going to have to figure out how to wrestle that. And I see that in my own experience of formation. I see it in yours a lot. And being willing to lament and express the real. It brought you to the real. You expressed to God, maybe, I don't want to say for the first time, but in a way that at that level of depth, at least for the first time,
I
your
think,
real feelings.
Even though I'd been a Christian, a Christ follower a long time, I think I always kind of viewed the relationship as I need to put my best foot forward. Like I need to appear to be this little righteous guy. And all gloves came off for this one.
That's such a great just place to.
Yeah.
So we'll stop here today. First page, first entry of your journal.
Yep.
Peter's journey into the wall. And I love this. Like what you shared is such a healing thing. I hope it's a freeing thing. And it is a journey to peace. I'm going to pause and not go any further because I don't want to put a bow on it, because where we're at today, it would be easy to try to put a bow out there. But we're going to keep talking about your journey in the wall, as difficult as that may be. And I just want to thank you for sharing that level of vulnerability and willingness to kind of just walk into that with us.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Appreciate that.
So thank you, everyone, for listening. And join us again. Check out cancerandpeace.com.